In April 1983, Father David Collins vanished from Holy Trinity Catholic Church in Ironwood, Oklahoma, leaving behind only unanswered prayers and whispered questions. He was remembered as a man of compassion and quiet strength, his kind eyes concealing burdens too heavy to share. In his final weeks, something had changed. His warm smile faded. He grew distracted, haunted. He walked the church grounds late at night, clutching a worn leather journal as if it carried the weight of his soul. And then one morning, he was gone, no note, no farewell, just an empty rectory and a community left to wonder. For 25 years, the mystery of Father Collins lingered over Ironwood like an unhealed wound. His name became a whisper of caution, his face a fading image in church directories. Then, in March 2008, the earth revealed a long-buried secret. On a bright Tuesday morning, construction crews breaking ground for a new medical center unearthed something unusual. A backhoe struck metal buried deep in the red Oklahoma soil. Work stopped. Carefully, they uncovered a corroded metal container. The lock had rusted, but the lid gave way under force. Inside were items that made even hardened workers pause. A tarnished silver crucifix, a cracked rosary, an empty glass vial that had once held holy water, and at the bottom, wrapped in brittle oilcloth, a leather-bound journal miraculously preserved. The authorities were called. The site became a crime scene. Forensic teams cataloged every artifact. But it was the journal that captured everyone's attention. In neat, deliberate handwriting, Father Collins told a story that would shatter Ironwood's image of safety. His final entry spoke of sleepless nights, of shadows outside his window, of strange cars and silent phone calls. But most of all, they spoke of what he had uncovered, a vast embezzlement scheme hidden beneath Ironwood's quiet surface. The journal named names: Robert Hale, beloved school superintendent; Charles Denton, a respected city councilman; Judge Raymond Phelps, a pillar of the legal community. These men, Father Collins wrote, had used their power not to protect, but to steal. They had conspired to divert public funds, school budgets, civic grants, infrastructure investments into their own pockets, enriching themselves while schools crumbled and vital services went unfunded. Page after page, Collins chronicled his growing dread as he gathered financial records, interviewed concerned citizens, and followed paper trails no one else dared to examine. His words shifted from quiet resolve to desperation. The final entry was haunting in its simplicity. If anything happens to me, let this record be my voice. May God forgive us all. The discovery sent shockwaves through Ironwood. News trucks lined the streets. Candlelight vigils filled Holy Trinity. Long-buried rumors resurfaced, gaps in budgets, projects that never materialized, audits that vanished without explanation. The families of the accused, some long dead and others still living, issued statements of grief or denial. Lawyers were hired. Emergency meetings were held behind closed doors. The diocese opened its own review. Authorities reopened financial records. Retired officials were questioned. And all the while, the people of Ironwood faced a bitter truth. Their city's past was darker and more corrupt than they had ever imagined. One question remained: what had become of Father Collins? Despite days of digging, no trace of his body was found. Cadaver dogs and ground-penetrating radar revealed nothing. Some believed he had been hurt and hidden too well to ever be found. Others wondered if he had fled, leaving behind the journal as his final defiance before meeting some unknown fate far from home. Father Collins became more than a missing priest. He became a symbol, a man who stood against the powerful and risked everything to expose greed and injustice. Today, a small memorial garden blooms at Holy Trinity where the rectory once stood. A plaque bears his name and the words, "Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God." Each year, on the anniversary of his disappearance, parishioners gather by candlelight to pray for Father Collins and for the courage to face the truth still buried in every community. Beneath Ironwood's soil, perhaps other secrets still wait for their day in the light. Father Collins' journal revealed a methodical, determined investigation, a priest transformed into a lone investigator, compelled by duty to confront a darkness few dared acknowledge. Line by line, in precise handwriting, he wove together a tapestry of hidden corruption. What made his work remarkable was his strict respect for his sacred office. No confidence shared in confession ever appeared in his pages. Everything he recorded came from his own observations, open conversations, and the courage of those who risked speaking out. The first figure to emerge in his notes was Arthur Hartwell, principal of Riverside Elementary. Hartwell, in his mid-50s, was seen as a pillar of the community, a man who smiled for yearbook photos and presided over school assemblies. But Collins' journal painted a far darker picture. Hartwell used his position to divert funds meant for the school. Collins documented suspicious discrepancies in school accounts, underfunded programs that had previously thrived, and maintenance budgets that mysteriously evaporated while contractors connected to Hartwell profited. Custodians and teachers quietly confided their concerns, talk of supplies that never arrived, invoices for work never done. But Hartwell was not alone. The second figure in Collins' so-called unholy trinity was City Councilman James Bradley. Outwardly, Bradley was the model of civic pride, a successful businessman, a regular at charity auctions, his photo a staple in the local paper. But Collins' journal exposed his role as protector and enabler. Bradley's influence kept financial audits from moving forward, and complaints about missing funds were buried beneath layers of red tape. Collins recorded accounts from small business owners who lost city contracts when they refused to play along. Others, after raising concerns, were subjected to sudden inspections and fines, their livelihoods threatened by the very government meant to support them. Bradley's retaliation was subtle, effective, and left no fingerprints. The most chilling figure of all was Police Captain Frank Morrison, the linchpin of the conspiracy. Morrison, a 20-year police veteran, was beloved by his officers and the community, a fixture at civic ceremonies and church events. But beneath that image was a man who manipulated law enforcement to protect his co-conspirators. The journal detailed how Morrison redirected inquiries about misused city funds, made reports vanish from records rooms, and applied quiet pressure on those who asked too many questions. Collins recorded a chilling account of a parishioner who, after spotting Morrison and Bradley in a heated discussion near the abandoned Sunset Grain elevator, found their business vandalized the next morning. No suspects, no arrests. It was that grain elevator, long forgotten on the outskirts of Ironwood, that served as the trio's meeting place. Collins described its towering silos, rusted ladders, and wind-blown debris, a place chosen for its isolation. He parked at a distance, watching through binoculars, documenting every meeting, every car, every furtive gesture. Under cover of night, the three men gathered there, believing they were safe from prying eyes. But Collins saw them, and he wrote it all down. Collins' plan was to take his findings beyond Ironwood, to federal authorities, beyond the reach of Morrison's badge, Bradley's money, and Hartwell's influence. His notes grew increasingly tense as he described his preparations. The copies he made of his evidence, the packages ready to be sent, the arrangements with trusted contacts. He wrote of being followed, of anonymous phone calls, of tires crunching gravel outside the rectory at night. He was afraid, but he refused to turn back. "If I am silenced, this record must speak for me," he wrote. His final entries were a blend of fear and faith, a man aware of the danger but determined to do what was right. The journal ended there, Collins' voice falling silent. But in that silence, he left behind a map, a call for others to follow where he could not go. In his final weeks, Father Collins' journal revealed a man consumed by anguish, fear, and righteous fury. Where once his pages reflected thoughtful meditations on faith and duty, now they bore the weight of a soul torn between sacred vows and a moral crisis that left no room for delay. Again and again, Collins wrote of the crushing responsibility he felt, that he alone seemed to stand between the citizens of Ironwood and those who were quietly bleeding the town dry from behind masks of respectability. His notes spoke of sleepless nights, shadows lingering at the rectory gate, and the deafening silence of superiors unwilling to risk the church's good name, even for the sake of truth. "How much more must be stolen while I navigate the proper channels," he scrawled, his usually neat handwriting jagged with frustration. "The church moves slowly, but corruption acts swiftly. Each day I delay is another day these men grow richer at the community's expense." Seeking guidance, Collins traveled to Westfield City to meet with Bishop O'Malley, a man he respected deeply. He went armed with names, dates, ledgers, and testimony, hopeful that someone would share his burden. But the bishop's response, as Collins recorded, was gentle yet firm. O'Malley urged caution, warning of the damage that unproven allegations could do to the church's standing and to the community's trust. He advised Collins to work within diocesan channels, to proceed carefully, and to protect the church's integrity. "We must protect the innocent, yes, but we must also protect the church," the bishop had said. "What good can we do if our house is destroyed by the storm?" Collins' frustration bled onto the page. "They tell me to have faith in the system, but the system is what shields these thieves. Their armor is forged from the silence of those too afraid to believe the unthinkable." His entries became darker as he wrestled with isolation, fear, and the sense that no place was safe. The rectory, once his refuge, felt like a prison. Every shadow seemed to conceal a threat, every knock at the door a warning. Yet he pressed on, unwilling to abandon his duty. In his final days, Collins documented his preparations. He described the evidence he had gathered: falsified invoices, diverted funds, financial statements that told a damning story, photographs of secret meetings at the Sunset grain elevator, and detailed logs of the conspirators' comings and goings. He wrote of making duplicates, storing them in multiple safe places, and hinted at confiding in a trusted friend outside the church, though the journal never named that person. His resolve hardened. He could no longer wait for permission. "Tomorrow night, I meet with Rebecca Martinez of the Westfield City Tribune," he wrote in his last entry, dated 3 days before he vanished. "She will publish the story if I can provide sufficient evidence. I pray God forgives me if I am breaking faith with the church, but I cannot break faith with the people of this town." The decision weighed heavily on him. He wrote of long hours spent in prayer, kneeling in the sanctuary, begging for guidance. But no sign came. In the end, it was the faces of those he served, the families struggling while funds meant to help them were stolen, that propelled him forward. The meeting place he chose was as symbolic as it was dangerous: the abandoned Sunset grain elevator, the very place where the conspirators had plotted their crimes. Collins believed the irony would make a powerful statement when the truth came to light. He could already see the headlines: "Conspiracy exposed, greed hidden in plain sight." He hoped the location might offer some safety. Who would expect a reckoning at the conspirators' own stronghold? But as he committed to the plan, unease crept into his words. "If they suspect my intent, will I leave that place alive?" he wrote. "Yet can I choose any other path and still call myself a man of God?" He ended with a prayer. "Lord, give me strength to face what comes. Let me serve you by serving your people. Let this be for justice, not glory." After that, the journal fell silent. The pages that followed remained blank, as if Father Collins had run out of words or time. The investigation into Father Collins' disappearance was little more than a formality, an exercise meant to quiet Ironwood's curiosity rather than uncover the truth. Police Captain Frank Morrison, one of the very men Collins had been preparing to expose, oversaw the case. His conclusion came swiftly and conveniently. Father Collins, overwhelmed by stress and depression, had wandered off into the countryside and taken his own life. No witnesses, no body, no evidence, just Morrison's authoritative voice assuring the town that this was a tragedy, not a mystery. The church, weary of potential scandal, did not press for answers. A new priest was quietly assigned to Holy Trinity, and Ironwood did its best to move on. But the journal told another story. Father Collins had not been broken. His final writings revealed clarity, purpose, and an unshakable resolve. He spent his last days preparing, making copies of every piece of evidence: fraudulent invoices, altered ledgers, photographs of secret meetings, records of missing funds. He documented where he hid these duplicates in secure locations across Ironwood. He confided in a trusted contact outside the church and beyond the reach of local power, someone tasked with sending the evidence to federal authorities and the press if he failed to check in. The journal's pages detailed Collins' growing sense of danger. He noted how Morrison, Bradley, and Hartwell watched him at public gatherings, the tension in their glances, the way conversations hushed when he approached. the sense of being followed. He understood that if they discovered his plan, they would stop at nothing. On the night he was to meet Rebecca Martinez of the Westfield City Tribune, Collins took one final precaution. He arrived at the Sunset Grain elevator hours early. The structure, abandoned and rusting on the edge of Ironwood, loomed like a monument to forgotten industry. Inside, its hollow chambers groaned with wind and age. Collins climbed the broken staircases, found a vantage point on the upper levels, and waited. From his hiding place, he watched as the three men arrived. His final journal entry captured the moment in stark, hurried prose. They came separately, but their guilt bound them like chains. Hartwell trembled, his voice shaking with fear. Bradley paced, furious, muttering curses beneath his breath. Morrison was calm, cold, every word measured, his eyes hard with calculation. They spoke of loose ends, of making sure this all goes away. I knew then I would not leave this place alive. His penmanship, steady through most of the journal, grew hurried and uneven as he rushed to record the truth before it was too late. He wrote of hearing footsteps on the stairs, the deliberate, heavy tread of men with deadly intent. He described the creak of the metal beneath him, the drumbeat of his own heart in his ears. They have found my hiding place, he wrote. I can hear them drawing near. If someone reads this, know that I go gladly if it means the people of Ironwood will finally see the truth. Tell the world what these men have done. Let my sacrifice mean something. And then silence. The pages that followed remained blank. No one knows what happened next. The grain elevator was searched after the journal's discovery, but no trace of Father Collins was found. The conspirators had erased all evidence, leaving only his words behind. Yet Collins' journal became his legacy, a voice from beyond the grave, exposing the greed and betrayal he had fought so hard to stop. His courage, his sacrifice, and his unrelenting pursuit of justice endured where he could not. Today, where the grain elevator once stood, a simple memorial marks the spot. Each year, on the anniversary of his disappearance, candles flicker in the dusk. Those who gather there whisper the promise Father Collins made with his final breath. Tell the world, let my sacrifice mean something. The discovery of Father Collins' journal in 2008 ignited an investigation that Ironwood could no longer ignore. The revelations forced authorities to reopen long-buried financial records and confront the corruption that had quietly drained the town's lifeblood for over 2 decades. Captain Frank Morrison was beyond earthly justice. He had died suddenly of a heart attack in 1987. But Arthur Hartwell and James Bradley still lived, still admired by many, their reputations protected by years of carefully maintained lies. When investigators presented the evidence drawn from Father Collins' meticulous notes, the falsified records, the diverted funds, the photographs of their secret meetings, the weight of guilt proved too much for Hartwell to bear. The mask he had worn for 25 years shattered. In a tearful, broken confession, Hartwell revealed the grim truth of what had happened that night at the Sunset Grain elevator. We never meant to kill him, Hartwell sobbed, his voice thick with anguish. We only wanted to scare him, to make him see that some truths were too dangerous to expose. But he wouldn't stop. He said God's justice mattered more than our reputations, that the town deserved to know. Hartwell described how Collins had faced them with unwavering resolve, citing scripture, speaking of duty, and denouncing the greed that had hollowed out Ironwood's heart. It was then that Morrison's fury boiled over. The police captain, long the enforcer who kept their crimes hidden, lost control. In a moment of blind rage, he grabbed a piece of rebar from the debris and struck the priest. Father Collins fell, his head striking the concrete, his voice silenced forever. Panic seized the conspirators. They had crossed the line from which there was no return. Morrison, ever the strategist, directed the cover-up. The grain elevator, with its echoing emptiness, now felt like a trap. They carried Father Collins' body to the city dump under cover of darkness, burying him where tons of refuse would soon erase all trace. It was a choice born of desperation, a place where no one would think to look. Yet even in their panic, there were things they could not destroy. The priest's crucifix, rosary, holy water vial, and journal, symbols of the man they had betrayed, remained sacred to them in a twisted way. Bradley, ever calculating, suggested a solution. Seal the items in a metal container and bury it far from the dump, deep beneath the soil at a construction site. It was, to them, a strange form of penance, preserving what they could not bear to defile, while ensuring it would never be found. Investigators verified Hartwell's confession as best they could. The dump site, now buried beneath decades of waste, offered no hope of recovery. But Hartwell's detailed account, combined with the journal and long-ignored financial records, painted a damning portrait of greed, betrayal, and silence. Confronted with the truth in Hartwell's words, Bradley at first denied everything. But as evidence mounted and public outrage swelled, he too crumbled. His apology to the community was hollow, a last attempt to salvage some shred of dignity from the ruins of his legacy. Ironwood was left to grapple with what had been hidden in plain sight, the pre-sacrifice, the rot beneath the town's polished surface, and the complicity of a silence that had cost them dearly. The city mourned not only Father Collins, but the integrity lost to decades of deception. In the aftermath, Holy Trinity dedicated a new memorial garden on the site where the grain elevator once stood. A statue of Father Collins rose in quiet defiance, hands clasped in prayer, eyes lifted skyward. The plaque at its base bore the words from his final journal entry. Tell the world, let my sacrifice mean something. Each year, on the anniversary of his passing, the people of Ironwood gather there. Candles flicker in the dusk, voices rise in prayer and promise. In those moments, Father Collins' legacy endures, not merely as a victim, but as a man who chose truth over safety, no matter the cost. Once the truth began to surface, the investigation gathered momentum with a force no one could stop. The revelations from Father Collins' journal, combined with Arthur Hartwell's tearful confession, tore away the decades-old veil of silence that had protected Ironwood's most respected men. What had long been whispered in corners was now shouted from rooftops, and the machinery of justice moved swiftly. Arthur Hartwell, now 73 and a shadow of the man who once ruled Riverside Elementary with a genial smile, was arrested at the assisted living facility where he had lived quietly for years. Confined to a wheelchair, Hartwell trembled as officers read him his rights. Residents watched in stunned silence as the man they knew as a kind, elderly neighbor was led away in handcuffs. His crimes, long hidden behind polite nods and civic awards, were finally laid bare for all to see. James Bradley's fall was just as dramatic. At 78, Bradley still lived in luxury at his sprawling estate on the outskirts of Ironwood, a mansion built on the profits of his once thriving construction empire. It was a bitter twist of fate that his own company, now under new leadership, was tasked with the excavation at the construction site where Father Collins' final resting place had been unearthed. The sight of police cars lined along Bradley's private drive became an iconic image, broadcast nationwide as a symbol of long overdue justice catching up with the powerful. The arrest rocked Ironwood to its core. For years, Hartwell and Bradley had been celebrated as models of civic virtue, men whose names adorn buildings, parks, and scholarships. Now, those names were spoken with disgust, their legacies reduced to cautionary tales of corruption, betrayal, and greed. But the case did more than bring down two aging criminals. The investigation reopened dozens of cold financial cases, mysterious budget shortfalls, stalled infrastructure projects, civic grants that vanished without a trace. Detectives pored over dusty ledgers, re-examined accounts, and interviewed whistleblowers who had once been silenced by fear or dismissed as troublemakers. And something remarkable happened. The voices that had long been drowned out by power and influence finally rose. Citizens who had suspected wrongdoing but felt powerless to act stepped forward. Former city employees, contractors, and business owners shared their stories of deals sabotaged, funds withheld, and livelihoods destroyed by corruption. Their testimonies became the foundation of further prosecutions, and of a reckoning Ironwood could no longer delay. The discovery of Father Collins' remains provided the final, irrefutable proof of the conspiracy. DNA testing confirmed what the journal had long foretold. The remains belonged to the priest who had given his life trying to expose the truth. The confirmation brought bittersweet closure to a mystery that had haunted Ironwood for 25 years. Father Collins was laid to rest at Holy Trinity Cemetery, in a plot overlooking the church he had served so faithfully. His funeral drew mourners from far beyond Ironwood, clergy, civic leaders, journalists, and countless ordinary people who had been touched by his story. The service was simple and dignified, filled with prayers for healing and for justice. At his grave, a new headstone bore the words that captured the heart of his sacrifice. He gave his life defending the truth. In the years that followed, Ironwood worked to heal. Memorials were dedicated, reforms were passed, and the city vowed never again to let greed hollow out its soul. Each year, on the anniversary of his passing, the community gathered at Holy Trinity to honor Father Collins, not just as a priest, but as a man who stood up when others turned away, and who paid the ultimate price for his courage. And through it all, the promise of his final plea endured. Tell the world, let my sacrifice mean something. The scandal that erupted from Father Collins' posthumous revelations sent shockwaves through Ironwood and far beyond. The quiet town, once content to bury its darkest secrets, found itself thrust into the national spotlight. News outlets descended on the community, telling the story of the priest who had given his life to expose corruption and defend the public trust. The details of his journal, the confessions it had drawn, and the courage it reflected captured the attention of a nation weary of greed and betrayal. The Catholic diocese, once cautious and hesitant to act, responded decisively. Church officials who had once counseled patience and discretion now spoke with one voice, declaring Father Collins a martyr for justice. The formal investigation they launched into his life and death not only cleared him of any wrongdoing, but praised him as a model of moral courage, a priest who had lived his vows to their fullest, even at the cost of his own life. The bishop who had once urged discretion publicly repented, acknowledging that Collins' example had shown them all the true meaning of service and sacrifice. In the heart of Ironwood, change took root. The Ironwood Civic Center, once named for James Bradley, was rededicated as the David Collins Civic Center. The renaming ceremony drew hundreds of community members, citizens, clergy, city officials, who gathered to witness the unveiling of the new name and to pledge themselves to a future free from the shadows of corruption. City Hall underwent reforms as well. Offices were audited, policies rewritten, and new oversight committees formed to ensure transparency. Advanced financial tracking systems were installed, and whistleblower protections were strengthened. Clear protocols made it easier for city employees and citizens alike to report misconduct without fear of retaliation. The City Council, determined to honor Father Collins' legacy, passed sweeping reforms. Background checks for officials and contractors were strengthened. All major contracts required independent audits. Civic projects were opened to public review, and citizens were encouraged, indeed, empowered, to attend council meetings and hold their leaders accountable. Perhaps the most lasting tribute came in the form of the Father David Collins Foundation, founded by parishioners of Holy Trinity and local civic leaders. What began as a modest effort grew into a powerful force for change. The foundation provided financial literacy programs, supported whistleblowers facing retaliation, and funded independent investigations into government fraud. Its mission was clear: to protect communities from the kind of quiet theft that had once bled Ironwood dry. The foundation's motto was taken directly from Father Collins' journal, a phrase that had come to define his mission. God's justice is more important than anyone's reputation. Those words, once scribbled in haste in the quiet of a darkened rectory, now appeared on banners, plaques, and training manuals. They became a rallying cry for those determined to protect the public good. Each year, on the anniversary of his disappearance, the people of Ironwood gather at the memorial garden where the Sunset Grain elevator once stood. There, amid the flowers and beneath the statue of Father Collins, they light candles and offer prayers, not just for him, but for the courage to continue his work. They pray for vigilance, for integrity, and for the strength to speak out against injustice, no matter how powerful those who commit it may be. Father Collins' sacrifice had not been in vain. From the heartbreak of his passing came a community reborn, one determined that no more voices would be silenced, no more secrets would be buried, no more fortunes would be built on betrayal. In Ironwood and in every place touched by his story, his legacy endured, a legacy of truth, courage, and unshakable faith. Years after the truth about the embezzlement conspiracy had finally emerged, strange stories began to circulate around Ironwood. Citizens who had once felt powerless, small business owners, former city workers, and ordinary residents spoke of sudden, unexplainable courage. People who had previously been too afraid to report corruption or fraud found themselves stepping forward, determined to expose wrongdoing. Community leaders and advocates began to notice an unusual pattern. Those who had long struggled in silence now found the strength to speak up, even when doing so meant challenging powerful figures or risking personal loss. Many described moments of clarity during sleepless nights, as if a quiet voice urged them to do what was right, to trust that the truth would prevail. Some said they felt watched over by an unseen protector, a presence that reminded them that standing up for honesty was a sacred duty. Others spoke of dreams in which a gentle figure urged them to act, or of finding unexpected peace in moments of moral crisis. The Catholic Church began to investigate these accounts as part of its consideration of Father Collins for beatification. While skeptics dismissed the stories as the product of suggestion or the lasting impact of Collins' example, believers saw something deeper at work. To them, it was as if the spirit of Father Collins still guided Ironwood, calling on its people to stand for justice as he had done. Whether through divine intervention or the enduring power of his sacrifice, Father David Collins continued to inspire honesty and courage long after his passing. His life's mission had not only uncovered a hidden web of greed, but had also planted seeds of vigilance and integrity that bore fruit in the years that followed. In city offices, school boards, and neighborhood associations, his name became shorthand for the moral standard Ironwood had once forgotten but now embraced. What would Father Collins do? His legacy was no longer just a memory or a monument. It was a living force, shaping choices, inspiring reforms, and reminding everyone that the truth can never stay buried forever. Today, visitors to Holy Trinity Catholic Church can see a memorial window installed in Father Collins' honor. The stained glass depicts St. Michael the Archangel standing over a fallen serpent of greed, his sword raised in defense of justice. Beneath him, an inscription reads, "Greater love has no one than this, to lay down one's life for one's friends." The grain elevator where Father Collins met his fate was demolished years ago. In its place stands a small park where families gather and children play, watched over by a community that remembers the high price paid for its rebirth. A bronze plaque near the playground tells his story, not of tragedy, but of a man who chose to speak the truth when it would have been easier and safer to stay silent. In Ironwood, the name David Collins has become synonymous with moral courage and the defense of the public good. His story is taught in local schools, not as a dry lesson in history, but as a living example of what it means to stand up for what is right. Teachers speak of him when they talk about ethics, and his journal is quoted in civic meetings when leaders debate difficult decisions. The confession that Father Collins could not give in life, the truth about corruption, betrayal, and the price of silence, was finally heard through the testimony of his words and the courage of those who followed his path. His journal, preserved against all odds, became the key that unlocked decades of secrets and reminded Ironwood of its duty to its own people. And somewhere in the intersection of faith, justice, and human frailty, Father David Collins' sacrifice continues to echo. His story reminds us that some truths are too important to bury, no matter how powerful those who would silence them may be. The truth, as Father Collins knew, always endures.